Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm AJ. I hope you're having a wonderful day. So what I've got in front of me are all of the current lineup of Mizuno irons. You've got 7 different iron choices if you're looking at Mizuno. So a lot of choices, a lot of options, can be a little overwhelming and a little confusing. So I thought in this video we would just look at each of the 7 irons that's currently available, talk about what they look like, what they do, who they're supposed to be for, and just give you a better idea of which iron or which combination of irons are going to make the most sense for your game, what the differences are maybe practically speaking that you would see between them, and just sort of help you narrow down, if you're looking for some Mizuno irons, which ones you want to be focusing in on. All right, here we have JPX Fly High. Now I put this in the same category as the irons, even though it is clearly a hybrid. But they make this all the way down to 29 degrees, which is essentially what they call a 7-iron replacement club. So at that point, if you've got the option of going 4, 5, 6, 7 iron or hybrid, depending how you want to call it, in this, I'm going to put it and group it with the irons. So what you have here is basically the most forgiving as far as getting the ball up in the air and getting good height and good distance out of your shot. This is going to be probably the #1 option. So if you've got a very slow swing speed, if you have trouble getting enough height on the ball to get it to land softer on the green, this is going to be a very good option to replace those longer irons. Now from there, let's move into the irons that have been out for a little bit. Those are the Mizuno Pro, and starting with the 221. Now this is very clearly the muscle back. This is the blade style iron. The club ideally suited for lower handicap golfers looking for more workability, versatility as far as being able to control trajectory, direction, hitting it off different kinds of lies. You're going to have all those options. Of course, the downside is it's not going to give you any real help or minimal help. It's not going to help you get the ball up in the air, and if you miss it toe or heel or high or low, you're going to know it, and it's going to show in the ball flight. So it's definitely a lower handicap, a better ball striker's club in general. It's got that perfect combination. It's got a thin top line, but it's not overly thin. One of the things I really don't like is when you get a top line that's super thin, that it ends up making the hosel look kind of chunky, and it just makes the club look basically unhittable. Mizuno does a great job of having the right ratio of top line thickness to hosel thickness to the length of the blade. Obviously, the sole is going to be very narrow, but overall, even though this is a very small, compact head, it doesn't look as scary as some other irons that are out there on the market. It still looks accessible, and it still looks hittable and playable. Just to give you an idea what the lofts are on these, the 4-iron is going to be 24. This 7-iron is going to be 34 degrees, and the pitching wedge is 46 degrees. So at this point in time, that is going to be what we would consider traditional iron lofts. Now going from there, we then move into the 223 iron, and this is with Mizuno. In some of their previous models, they went basically, and they had a straight muscle back, and then they went into a straight cavity back. Basically the same design, the same build to it, just one was a muscle back and one was a cavity back. The 223, a little bit different because the longer irons are actually utilizing some of that improved distance technology. So trying to help you hit the longer irons a little bit further while still keeping the short irons in more traditional design and more traditional distances. So I think when it goes down to through the 7-iron, it is giving you a little bit more help, a little bit more ball speed, and then 8, 9 pitching wedge. That's going to be more similar again to these 221s. Obviously, very similar look overall. Again, the top line very thin, the sole again thin, the offset very comparable, and the overall head size very similar to the other 221. But a little bit more forgiving and a little bit more ball speed in the long irons. And clearly, you could very easily do a combination of this guy and be very happy. They would blend together very nicely. Okay, now the last iron in the Pro series is the 225, and this is also known as the HMB, the Hot Metal Blade. So this is just sort of continuing on the progression we've seen here, where this one was basically traditional lofts and not really giving you any sort of face flexing, any sort of ball speed technology in it. This one, the 223, was giving it to you in the longer irons, but the shorter irons are still going to be traditional. The 225 is going to give you more of that increased ball speed all the way across the set. So not just in the long irons, but also in the short irons. Now you will also notice if you take this 225 and compare it with the 221, well, it looks very, very similar when you look at it from any given angle. So looking at it from the back, looking at it from the sole or down at the sole, looking at it from the top line, all of these are pretty similar. Now obviously the 225 is a little bit thicker in each of these categories, you can see it, but the overall shape is very, very similar. So that's why they call it that hot metal blade. It still has that sort of blade appearance to it, even though it does have that ball speed technology in it running all the way through the set. Now the lofts on these, again, we're getting stronger. These are, again, more distance irons. So we are talking in the 4 iron, this is going to be 21.5 degrees. The 7 iron is going to be 30 degrees. And the pitching wedge is now 44 degrees. So this 7 iron in this 225 is now 4 degrees stronger than our muscle back, and the pitching wedge is 2 degrees stronger. So definitely stronger lofts, definitely expect to see more distance beyond just the fact that you've got more of that face flexing technology for ball speed, but you've just got lower lofts, you've got stronger lofts, and you are going to see more distance because of that. So if you are doing a blended set, definitely something to keep in mind to make sure you are blending and having your gapping correct and getting the right distances, because the difference between if you decide to go 225 to 221, there is going to be some gap there. So you may have to bend some things or figure out exactly what combination of irons you're going to go with in order to get progressions that are consistent through the set. Okay, we've covered the Mizuno Pro line, right? We've got the 221, we've got the 223, and we've got the 225. And I'm going to leave this 225 here for a minute. I'm going to scoot these guys out of the way, because what we now get into is the JPX923 lineup. They've got 3 different models. They've got a Pro, they've got a Hot Metal, and they've got a Hot Metal High launch. And what you're going to see very quickly is we're going to start off with the Hot Metal Pro, is that this Hot Metal Pro is sort of in an interesting position in this lineup, because honestly, when I look at this club, and I'm going to put this 225 right next to it, and we look at the face of these 2 irons, they look almost identical. They are very similar in their size and shape. If we look at the top line from these 2 irons, you will again see they are very similar in both size and shape. Really, when we get down to it, the only 2 ways you're going to notice a real difference in these irons is when we flip them over and we are either looking at the sole, in which case you can now see the 225 is definitely a little bit thinner versus the JPX Pro that has a little bit more substantial sole width to it. And then of course, obviously, if we look at them from the back, you can see the JPX line with the cavity back, and you can see the Mizuno Pro with that muscle back design. So the big difference between this 923 and this 225, obviously besides the look of the cavity on this one, is that this guy has what I consider aggressively strong lofts. So we're talking about in the 4 iron, 19 degrees versus this guy that was 21.5. In the 7 iron, we're talking about 28.5 versus 30 on the 225, and the pitching wedge is 42.5 versus 44 on this guy. From there, we then move into the JPX 923 Hot Metal, just the middle of the 3 set of the 3 of them. And this one is really sort of taking the Pro and just sort of making everything a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger overall club head. It's a little bit thicker top line. It's a little bit wider sole, a little bit deeper cavity. The one thing that they do still have in common, though, is the lofts. These 2 irons, both the Pro and the Hot Metal, have the exact same loft. Really, I would expect very similar distances between these 2. It's just this one's a little bit more forgiving, maybe a little bit more height out of this one, but they're going to be very similar. Now from there, the last iron we're going to talk about is the JPX923 Hot Metal High launch. Okay, so the big difference between the Hot Metal High launch and just the Hot Metal is, well, they increased the lofts on this one. So basically they've just added a couple degrees of loft across the board to what was on the Hot Metal to help either if you've got a slower swing and you just need more height on the ball, you need more air under the ball, or you maybe have a lot of forward press, you have a lot of forward shaft lean at impact, and so you need something that has a little more traditional lofts. That's what you're going to get with this high launch. So you still have the ball speed coming off the face, you still have the forgiving nature, but you don't have the aggressively strong lofts that you may not be able to get up in the air. So just as an example, they don't make the high launch in a 4-iron, but the 5-iron is 25 degrees in the high launch. The 5-iron in the standard JPX Hot Metal is 22 degrees, so this is 3 degrees more loft, so a little more height, a little easier to get the ball airborne. The 7-iron in this one, 31 degrees, and the pitching wedge is 45 degrees, which again, these are more traditional lofts. So there you go, 7 different iron heads from Mizuno, a lot of different options, and obviously, again, you can do sort of different combinations. The big takeaway I would say at the end of this is really make sure you know what the different lofts are again, because especially if you're wanting to do any sort of combinations, it's going to be important to know those loft differences, and just to understand that this 223 Mizuno Pro and this JPX 923 Hot Metal Pro, they both say Pro, they both say Mizuno, but you're going to have very different results with these two irons because this is 46 degree pitching wedge, this is 42.5 degree pitching wedge, and that same difference basically runs the whole set. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, please go down below, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you'll be alerted when I post new videos. We're going to be taking all these Mizunos, moving them into the fitting studio so we can start fitting these Mizuno clubs. So that is very exciting. If you're interested in getting fit for Mizuno clubs and you are in the Atlanta area, definitely reach out to me through the channel and we can set something up. Yeah, I think that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time. Bye.